to check his phone for the evidence. He went silent. The first part of the silence was likely when he was reviewing the videos I sent him, followed by a silence likely stemming from his own embarrassment. I expressed my regret to him that he had to witness such videos involving his daughter, but I had no other option than to share them. I'm not trying to be a saint here. I can't just stay silent and take all the blame on myself when I'm the one who's been wronged. I'm the victim in this situation. That's all I heard from him. I returned after around a month. By then, Kara had left the house. However, she was opposing the divorce and requesting alimony as well as a share of the house instead. My lawyer countered her alimony claim by highlighting the mental distress I had endured due to her actions. He also assured me that our marriage was short-lived and she had no financial contribution towards purchasing the house, so she couldn't stake a claim to it. The legal case is still ongoing, but I think I've made some progress from where I was a few months ago when all of this was revealed. I'm not in a relationship with anyone, and I don't plan to be in one anytime soon. I'm focusing on overcoming my drinking habit, which I developed during my difficult phase in Florida. I appreciate your patience in reading my story. Hey dude. Right now, I'm on a FaceTime call with my girlfriend. She's supposed to be alone at home. During our call, I doze off and then wake up to go to the bathroom. While I'm in the restroom, I hear strange moaning sounds and swishing noises from her end of the call, like someone using mouthwash. I listen carefully for about 5 minutes, just to make sure I'm not mistaken. Eventually, I ask her in a friendly way, "Oh, what are you up to?" I'm trying not to sound suspicious. She answers that she's just lying down. So I ask her about all those noises, and she says she's not doing anything. After that, I'm quiet for a moment, and she mentions that she's still not feeling well. I'm taken aback because she didn't mention being sick in the past few days. Anyway, I decide to tell her that I'm muting myself because I might snore, which is a lie. I'm actually listening closely. I hear the same noises again. It's crazy. I usually only see this kind of stuff on Twitter. I can't believe I might be getting cheated on while on the phone. Unbelievable. How should I handle this? Oh, by the way, she lives about 17 minutes away, viaduct to toll road. I'm thinking about driving over to her place to see what's up. I'll keep you all updated. Update: I drove over to her place while staying on the call with her muted. The first thing I checked was if there were any unfamiliar cars around. Surprisingly, I didn't see any. At this point, I'm doubting myself, like, am I imagining things? Maybe she's genuinely sick. I even consider heading back home, but then that gut feeling kicks in. You know that feeling, right? The one that's like, nah, you better dig into this situation more. I knock on the door, but she doesn't answer. I hear her moving around and talking on the phone under the covers. I knock again, and this time, her phone gets muted, and she pauses our conversation. Now I'm thinking something's definitely not right. Finally, she opens the door, and her expression is really surprised. I'm like, hey, what's up? I just wanted to come by and see you. She responds with, oh, hey, what brought you here? I'm just hanging out. At that moment, things get awkward, and I can tell she's really uncomfortable and doesn't want me to enter. I try to kind of push my way in, but she blocks me. We make eye contact for around 30 seconds, and to break the silence, she tells me, I'm not allowed to have anyone inside. This is despite the fact that she sneaked me into her house a few times before, and even her mom allowed it when she wasn't there. So I tell her, I'm sure something's not right, and I want you to let me in. As I start walking in, she places her hand on my chest and says, no, you're acting crazy. Everything's all right. I really don't like it when someone tries to manipulate me, so I'm like, okay. I begin to walk away. While I'm leaving, the FaceTime call ends. I check the door, and she's still there. Initially, I don't pay much attention, but then I notice her hands, and she doesn't have her phone. This means someone else ended the call. At that moment, I start getting really anxious. I move her aside and head to her room. While I'm walking, I can hear her yelling my name, but I don't care. Eventually, I reach her room, and as soon as I open the door, I feel really uneasy. I can hardly believe what I'm seeing. It's like something straight out of a movie. There's a shirtless guy in her bed, covering his legs with a blanket, and he's looking right at me. While I'm looking at him, that's when I hear her footsteps behind me. She grabs me from behind and says, "A baby, I'm sorry, a crying and all." I'm not one to hit women, but I've never felt such a strong urge to. I'm still locking eyes with this guy, and he's looking away nervously. After around 30 seconds of this, something in my mind suddenly breaks, and I don't feel shocked anymore. I turn to look at her, she's on the ground crying and everything. I gather up all the things I've ever given her that I can find in the room. With the most serious expression I've ever had, I leave. She follows me as I'm leaving the house, telling me she loves me and all, but I'm not feeling anything. I keep my serious face and walk to my car, then drive away. The entire journey back home, my phone is blowing up with her calls. As I step inside my place, she's still calling non-stop. I had to block her number, otherwise, she'd probably still be calling me. I have no idea how I'm going to handle this situation, but the way things unfolded is really messed up. It's messed up for her, but I'm definitely hurting too. Edit, I've made up my mind to never talk to her again. I've gotten the closure I needed, and I won't let her have the satisfaction of getting her closure. Also, the guy involved came to me and said he didn't know she had a boyfriend, and he thought she was just chatting casually when she was talking to me. Strangely, the entire school seems to know about what she did, and many people have distanced themselves from her because of it. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's like karma has caught up with her. I was 30 years old and happily married to my wife, who was also 30 at the time. We had been married for about 6 years. I'll call her Sarah, which isn't her real name. During those first 6 years of marriage, we traveled, ate together, and spent evenings together pretty much every night. In 2019, I started noticing some signs that, looking back, should have made me realize something was off. In early 2019, I had to go out of town for a work conference, which was the first time I'd ever been away from home overnight without her. She immediately suggested that her friend, a 29-year-old guy I'll call Mark, not his real name, might come over and even stay during those days. Now for context, she texted this friend all the time. They were close, and I know for sure they had been involved romantically before I met her. I firmly said no, pointing out that he hadn't visited in the 6 years we'd been together except for the one time I was away. While she got angry, she seemed to respect my wishes based on what I knew and what I saw on the security cameras. There were other things that also made me hesitate, but to save time, I'll move on. Now, let's jump to the end of 2019. While we're at the movies, I noticed her sending messages to someone on her Apple Watch during the film. This was quite unusual for her, and though I can't recall the exact content, the messages seemed a bit too strong for just a coworker at her new job, even though they weren't explicitly sexual or romantic. After the movie, I bring it up, and she dismisses it. Her behavior starts changing. She sits away from me on the couch, goes to a different room to change clothes, and such. I begin to wonder if she's cheating on me or if something is being kept from me. I feel guilty for even considering the idea of checking her phone for confirmation, thinking that if I do so and I'm wrong, our marriage might not be worth continuing. After mulling over it for days, I make up my mind to check in January 2020. Her phone is usually nearby, but I don't know the passcode. Thankfully, I can access her watch, and she had set the passcode to our anniversary, a twist of irony. What I find out next is truly horrifying. Sarah and Mark are discussing her encounters with a coworker, and they're making fun of me for not realizing what's happening. Sarah is talking about how the thought of me touching her disgusts her, and she can't even imagine having children with me. We were trying for kids in mid-2019, which makes this especially painful. Then, I read the messages between Sarah and the coworker. We'll call him Carl. Those messages are very explicit, and Sarah is showing more affection for him in every way than she's showing me now. Each message reveals something new. That hurts even more. She used a trip she said was to support a friend as an excuse to meet up with Carl. She started changing in the bathroom to hide the hickey marks on her body from me. Her therapist is aware of all this and believes I should know, but also thinks she should be happy with whoever she chooses. I stayed up until 3 or 4 a.m. reading these messages and taking pictures of everything. I couldn't sleep that night, and I clenched my jaw so hard it caused issues for months. She heads off to work. I'm off that day, and my first call is to a lawyer. What choices do I have? What can I legally say or not say when I confront her? I wait for her to return home, rereading the messages to make sure it wasn't just a terrible dream. When I have the talk with her, I share what I know without revealing that I had gone through her texts. I mention that I noticed a hickey, which is a lie, but she talked about it in the messages and that I'm aware she's texting someone. Sarah denies it and tries to argue that someone else gave her the hickey. But I eventually read a message from her watch. I suppose I hoped she would break down and confess everything. However, instead of that, Sarah explodes in anger over me invading her privacy. The way she tried to twist things and make me the bad guy left me stunned. She storms out of the house and disappears for 3 days. She doesn't let me know where she is, even though I asked her to share her location so I know she's safe. Up until now, I only have a partial understanding of where she went or what she did during that time. When she returns, she tells me she wants to work things out and spend some time together. Things take a bad turn. I catch her sneaking off to meet him once more, and she foolishly leaves her watch behind, allowing me to read their messages in real time. By February 2020, I finally inform her that I've spoken to a lawyer. She insists she won't agree to anything until we go to couples counseling. I go along with it, but it quickly becomes a mess. When I explain that we're there because she had an affair, she argues about my choice of words, suggesting that affair is too strong. She also lies about cheating on me prior to Carl with a married man, something I discovered later by checking her watch again. She admits her plan was to find an apartment and then give me divorce papers without me knowing what was happening. She even tries to shift blame for the affair onto me, using minor disagreements as evidence of my supposedly cold and uncaring behavior. For instance, I didn't immediately react angrily when my parents gave her a Christmas gift she didn't like or when her parents playfully teased her. At this point, the decision becomes clear. I need to divorce her as she'll never tell the truth. We agree that Sarah will leave our house, and I even assist her in finding an apartment. I'm willing to do anything to speed up her departure from the house. In March 2020, I witnessed the news about the onset of COVID, and all construction work halts, including the renovation of her apartment, which was nearly ready. This leaves her with nowhere to go. From March to June 2020, I'm stuck in the house with her. Just to clarify, she's familiar enough with legal matters to realize that leaving could complicate her case and result in expenses for her. Those few months were incredibly difficult. Trying to carry out my job and coexist in a house with someone who hurt me and mocked me was sometimes unbearable. We attempted as best as we could to keep things civil and avoid shouting at each other whenever we crossed paths. Imagine spending over 90 days preparing meals, passing by each other, and seeing no one else but the person who ended your marriage and shattered your heart every day. I pretty much isolated myself in a room for about 8 hours, then occupied my time with yard work or exercise to avoid interacting with her. She mostly moved out in late June, when the world began to reopen slightly, and she had all her belongings out by July. Knowing I wanted to keep the house, she manipulated the situation to her advantage to avoid being publicly criticized. To this day, her family remains unaware of what led to the divorce. She didn't inform her parents about the divorce until after the papers were signed. She essentially pressured me into pretending we were still together until that point. Then I told her she needed to let her parents know, or else I would do it. Her parents never inquired about the cause, although a couple of them wished me well. I didn't feel the need to tell them the reason because, despite the pain and manipulation she caused, I didn't want to hurt them. Her parents never did me wrong. Carl and Sarah's relationship didn't last. When I found out, Carl urged her to leave me and be with him. However, she attempted to repair our relationship, and he ended things with her, leaving her with no one. Sarah and I rarely communicate now, except when it's absolutely necessary, which is infrequent. At times, I've questioned if it was a mistake not to publicly expose her infidelity. The people who matter to me are aware of the truth. I also never confronted or even spoke to Carl or Mark or her friend, who knew about all of this but didn't warn me. As for myself, I found someone who is genuinely good, and we have a strong relationship. I haven't told Sarah about it, as it's not her concern. Similar to not telling her family about her cheating, I thought about informing Sarah how well I'm doing, but I believe that would just be taking pleasure in her misfortune.